Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something, well, not just for UPSC aspirants, especially those gearing up for the International Relations paper, but it's relevant, I think, for anyone really, anyone trying to understand this whole connected world we're living in. We're going to be talking about technology and globalization and the emergence of this thing called the information society. So yeah, get ready for some serious aha moments.
It's dense for sure, but it is like getting a cheat sheet for the 21st century.
Okay, let's dive right in. The source material starts by comparing this whole technology explosion to the Industrial Revolution. Think about it. Steam engines, factories, mass production. It wasn't just about new gadgets.
Right.
It completely changed how people lived and worked.
Exactly. And we're seeing that same pattern again now with information and communication technology. And, the source highlights three major information revolutions that have really accelerated globalization.
So first we had the telegraph, the telephone, the radio, instant communication across distances.
Then TV, early computers, satellites, transmitting information even faster and further.
And now, boom, smartphones, the internet, constant global connection. It's like national borders are becoming less and less important. When you can video chat with someone across the world just as easily as you talk to your neighbor, this has huge implications for you UPSC folks.
Yeah.
Because it's changing the entire game of international relations.
Absolutely.
Technology is driving globalization. But how does it actually change? What society looks like? How it functions? The source keeps mentioning the information society. What does that even mean? Like for someone living in it?
Think of it this way. The industrial age was all about factories churning out physical goods.
Right.
The information age is about producing and sharing knowledge.
Okay.
Economies are shifting from factory floors to networks.
Interesting. So instead of those rigid hierarchies we used to see in traditional companies, we're getting these more flexible, interconnected networks. The source even mentions Manuel Castells in his idea of the network society. Is that what we're talking about here?
Precisely. Businesses are operating as network corporations with branches and subsidiaries all over the globe. Think about companies like Amazon with its vast network of warehouses and delivery systems, or Apple with its global supply chain and network of retail stores.
Yeah.
They're operating on a scale we've never seen before. And it's not just businesses. Social movements are organizing online. Think about the Arab Spring uprisings, heavily influenced by social media. Even terrorist organizations like Al-Qaeda have adopted this network structure.
Wow.
It's a whole new way of operating, for better or worse.
It's like the world is becoming this giant interconnected web. All this connectivity is pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But it feels like there has to be a downside, right? The source also mentions increased risk uncertainty and insecurity, almost like it's a trade-off.
It is a trade-off, like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
As we become more interconnected, we're exposed to a wider range of influences. Information ideas, events, everything's happening at warp speed.
Right.
It makes it much harder to predict what will happen next, and potentially makes things a lot more volatile. This is where it gets really interesting for anyone studying international relations, because the old playbook doesn't really apply anymore.
So with everything so interconnected, doesn't that make the world feel a lot more fragile? Like one small event can have these huge ripple effects. The source even brought up chaos theory. Is that what they're getting at?
That's exactly it. Think about it. A ship gets stuck in the Suez Canal, and suddenly there are global supply chain disruptions, shortages, price increases, or a virus emerges in a remote village, and within weeks it's a global pandemic. This interconnectedness means we're all more vulnerable to events that we can't control. And that can feel pretty unsettling.
Okay, this is kind of blowing my mind. The source is basically arguing that we've moved from this world where the state provided security and stability, what they call first modernity, to this second modernity, a risk society that feels largely out of control. Give me an example of what this out-of-control feeling actually looks like in the real world.
Well, think about climate change. It's a global problem that no single nation can solve on its own.
Right.
We need global cooperation. But that's often hampered by national interests and political gridlock, or consider the globalized financial system. A stock market crash in one country can trigger a domino effect worldwide, leading to economic instability. We saw that happen during the 2008 financial crisis.
Okay, so in this risk society, where everything is interconnected and unpredictable, how do we even define what a political conflict is? It's not just about traditional warfare anymore, right?
You're absolutely right. According to Ulrich Beck, the nature of political conflict is changing. It's less about fighting over goods provided by the government, things like jobs, healthcare benefits, and more about the distribution of bads.
bads.
The risks, the threats, the problems that no one wants to deal with.
So instead of arguing about who gets the bigger slice of the pie,
Right.
we're arguing about who gets stuck with the hazardous waste.
Exactly. Think about things like nuclear waste disposal pandemics, cyber attacks.
Yeah.
These are global problems that require global solutions. But no one wants to be the one left holding the bag. It's a whole new dimension of political conflict that we're only beginning to understand.
That's a pretty sobering thought. It seems like this interconnectedness has created a world that's both exhilarating and terrifying.
It certainly has. And that's what makes understanding these concepts so crucial, especially for those of you preparing for the UPSC exams. It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about grasping the forces shaping our world, the challenges we face, and the potential solutions.
Right. It's about understanding the bigger picture and how these global trends impact us all. But before we get into solutions, let's take a closer look at some specific examples of how this information society is playing out in the real world. Join us for part 2 of this deep dive, where we'll explore the impact of technology on everything from transnational corporations to social movements. See you there.
Welcome back to the deep dive. In the last part, we talked about how technology is driving globalization and creating this new information society, which honestly sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel.
Right, it's like we're living in the future, but we don't have the instruction manual. But let's get specific. We talked about this shift towards a network society where everything is interconnected. How is that actually playing out in the real world? Can you give me like an example I could actually point to?
Absolutely. Let's take transnational corporations, or TNCs. Remember how we talked about companies operating as networks? Well, many TNCs are structured as these massive webs of franchises and subsidiaries all over the planet. It allows them to take advantage of things like lower labor costs in one country or maybe favorable tax regulations in another.
So a company could have its headquarters in New York, its manufacturing in China, and its customer service center in India.
You got it. And with all the advancements in communication technology, managing these complex global operations is actually easier than ever before. They can coordinate production, marketing, distribution all across continents and in real time. It's pretty amazing from a logistical standpoint.
It's mind-blowing. But what about the impact on workers? Globalization makes sense for companies, but does it always benefit everyone? It seems like there are always winners and losers in these big shifts.
That's a really complex question, and to be honest, the answer isn't always clear-cut. Globalization does create new opportunities and jobs in some regions, but it can also lead to job displacement and even exploitation in others. This is something you'll definitely want to consider as you study international relations, especially for the UPSC exam.
The source even talks about how some argue a new information age is replacing the industrial age, with societies transforming into information societies and economies becoming knowledge economies. It's a lot to take in.
It is, and this shift has some serious implications for the global workforce. In a knowledge economy, skills like critical thinking, problem-solving, creativity, those become super valuable. It's not just about manual labor anymore. It's about brain power.
So it's not just about learning a trade. It's about being able to adapt and learn new things constantly.
Exactly. This puts a lot of pressure on individuals to stay relevant in the job market. If you don't keep learning and upgrading your skills, you risk falling behind.
That makes sense. It's like we're all in this constant race to keep up with technology, which seems to change at the speed of light.
That rapid pace of change is actually another defining feature of the information society. New technologies are constantly emerging, disrupting entire industries and creating new ones practically overnight. It's exciting and unsettling at the same time.
Think about how smartphones have completely revolutionized communication. I mean, we do everything on them now. Banking, shopping, dating, entertainment. It's become such a huge part of our lives.
And that's just one example. Artificial intelligence, biotechnology, renewable energy. These are all fields that are rapidly advancing and transforming the way we live and work. This constant innovation creates opportunities for those who can adapt, but it also creates challenges.
It's almost like we're constantly playing catch-up with the latest gadgets and trends. But you're right, there are incredible opportunities here too. It's not all doom and gloom.
It's definitely not all doom and gloom. It's important to remember that technology is ultimately a tool. It can be used for good or for ill, depending on who's wielding it and for what purpose. It's up to us as individuals and as a global society to shape how technology is developed and used.
So how do we navigate this complex landscape? What are like the first steps?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think education plays a huge role. We need to equip ourselves with the knowledge and skills to understand and critically evaluate the impact of technology on our lives.
So it's not enough to just be a passive consumer of technology.
Yeah.
We need to be active participants in shaping its future.
Exactly. And that's where the study of international relations becomes so crucial. It helps us understand the global forces at play, the power dynamics, and the potential solutions to the challenges we face in this hyper-connected world.
I'm seeing how this is all coming together now.
Sure.
For our listeners who are prepping for the UPSC, this is all gold for your international relations paper.
Absolutely. The UPSC exam demands that you deeply understand these global trends and their implications. And the information society, with all its complexities and contradictions, is a major theme that you need to grasp.
We've talked about transnational corporations and how the nature of work is changing. What are some other real-world examples of how technology is impacting the global landscape?
Well, let's talk about social media. Think about platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They've connected billions of people worldwide. It's incredible to think about the sheer scale of it. And it's not just about sharing pictures of your lunch or keeping up with friends. These platforms have created entirely new avenues for communication, activism, and even political mobilization.
We look at the Arab Spring uprisings. Those were heavily influenced by social media. People were able to organize protests and share information in ways that were never possible before. It was a game changer.
Exactly. That's a powerful example of how technology can amplify voices and challenge traditional power structures. It's exciting to see people using these tools to create positive change in the world. But of course, like anything else, there are risks involved.
Right, because social media can also be used to spread misinformation, sow discord, and even incite violence. It's like we're always dealing with two sides of the same coin with this technology stuff.
It's true, and that's why it's more important than ever to develop media literacy skills. We need to be able to critically evaluate the information we encounter online, especially on social media. You can't just believe everything you read. You have to be able to separate fact from fiction.
It can be so hard these days. We're
Yeah.
constantly bombarded with information from so many sources. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and just give up trying to figure out what's true. It almost feels like too much sometimes.
And that brings us back to the idea of risk and uncertainty in the information society. With so much information circulating, it's easy to feel disoriented and even anxious. We're constantly trying to process and make sense of a world that's changing faster than ever before.
It's like our brains weren't designed to handle this much information overload. And as we talked about before, that feeling of uncertainty can actually contribute to a sense of insecurity and anxiety in our daily lives.
Absolutely. It affects everything, from how we vote to how we interact with each other to our mental health. It's a powerful force that we need to learn to understand and navigate.
Wow. It's pretty clear that this information society is a complex and ever-evolving landscape. And understanding all of this, the good and the bad, is crucial for anyone who wants to make sense of the world, not just UPSC aspirants.
It is indeed. And that's why we encourage all our listeners to stay curious, stay informed, and keep diving deep into these important issues.
Great advice. We'll be back soon with part 3 of this episode, where we'll wrap up our discussion and explore some potential solutions to the challenges we've discussed. We've talked a lot about the problems, but we promise we haven't forgotten about solutions.
Stay tuned.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent the last 2 parts really exploring this whole idea of the globalized information society. We've talked about these mind-blowing changes technology has brought, how it's reshaping globalization and creating this risk society.
Yeah.
Where everything feels connected and kind of unpredictable. Yeah, it's a lot to process for sure. But, understanding these trends is essential, not just for acing your UPSC International Relations paper.
Yeah.
But I think also for navigating your own life in the 21st century.
Exactly.
But honestly, so far, it's felt a little overwhelming. Like we're stuck in this chaotic system with no way out. The source material didn't shy away from the problems, but it didn't really offer a roadmap for what we actually do about all this.
It's true. There's no easy fix, no magic bullet solution. But the source does hint at some potential approaches. One of the key takeaways for me is the importance of international cooperation. Remember how we talked about those global risks like climate change, pandemics, cyber threats? No single country can really tackle those alone.
So we need to figure out how to work together, even when it's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And countries have different priorities.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that sounds great in theory, but in reality, international cooperation can be pretty messy.
Right. It's definitely not easy,
No.
but it is absolutely essential. Think about it this way. We're all interconnected, whether we like it or not. What happens in one part of the world inevitably affects other parts. Our fates are intertwined, even if we don't always see it that way.
I'm starting to get it. But global cooperation feels so big and out of our control as individuals. What can we do on a personal level to navigate this information society and not get totally swept away by it?
That's a great question. And this is where I think individual empowerment comes in. Remember how we talked about the importance of media literacy? Well, a lot of it comes down to developing your own critical thinking skills. We need to be able to evaluate information critically, identify biases, and separate fact from fiction.
So it's not just blindly accepting everything we read online or see on social media. We have to be more discerning about what information we consume and what we choose to share.
Exactly. It's about becoming an active, informed citizen. You have to ask questions, do your own research, and consider multiple perspectives. It's like becoming an information detective.
I love that. But
Yeah.
it's not just about being critical of the information we're taking in, right? It's also about how we're contributing to the information landscape.
Absolutely. It's about being responsible digital citizens.
Mm.
We need to be mindful of what we share online, aware of the potential consequences of our words and actions. Think before you post, as the saying goes.
Right. It's a great reminder, especially in this age where misinformation can spread like wildfire. One careless share can have a ripple effect we never intended.
That's why critical thinking is so important. And let's not forget the importance of continuous learning and adaptation. The information society isn't static. New technologies are constantly emerging, new challenges are arising, and we need to be able to keep up.
So it's not just about what we learned in school or university. It's about lifelong learning. We have to stay curious and open to new ideas, even if they challenge our existing beliefs.
That's the spirit. Embrace the challenge. Stay curious and never stop learning.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. It's clear that the globalized information society presents us with a whole new set of opportunities and challenges. It's exciting, it's overwhelming, and it's definitely not going away anytime soon.
It's the world we live in, and understanding it is crucial for all of us.
Yeah.
Whether you're prepping for the UPSC exam or just trying to make sense of your own life.
Right. For our listeners who are studying for the UPSC, remember, understanding these concepts isn't just about passing an exam. It's about understanding the world we live in and becoming active, informed citizens who can contribute to positive change. And for everyone out there, remember to keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. If you found this deep dive helpful, hit that like button and subscribe for more insightful explorations. We'll see you next time.